So there you have it, folks. My Licorice is alive with Charlie Parker's Yardbird Suite. The tune, composed in 1946 at the very dawn of the bebop era, well, it has been a jazz standard and Parker anthem ever since. Though based primarily in New York, Yardbird was first recorded right here in the land of law by an impresario who founded Dial Records by the name of Ross Russell. Miles Davis was on the original recording. Anyway, check out the Parker recordings on Dial Records. And by the way, Ross Russell also wrote a very cool jazz novel inspired by the life of Charlie Parker called The Sound. It really takes you into the heart of the late 1940s jazz scene. I recommend you check it out. And also another point of information and uber trivia, if you want to get into the weeds with me, Ross Russell and Charlie Parker were both characters in a screenplay I wrote called Central Avenue, which takes you back into that world. And it is my fervent hope that someday, somehow, my screenplay, which is still sitting on my desk tormenting me, will find its way onto a screen for you all to see and hear. Okay, so welcome friends, subscribers, and countrymen to another installment of Rebel Without Applause, coming to you from my movie studio apartment right here in the Wood of the Holly under the sign overlooking the enchanted land of law. And I am still doing my best to break it down jazz-wise, joke-wise, and otherwise. And right now I'm trying to squeeze something relevant out of this dry sponge that is my brain. And I've been watching this first week of impeachment hearings on TV, and my main takeaway is this. The iceberg that the PVP, and by that I mean Putin's vice president, the iceberg that the PVP is standing on just got a lot smaller and a lot thinner. Maybe global warming is real after all. Not that I'm feeling particularly vindicated about that. I don't want to say I told you so. But basically, as I predicted in my last missive, entitled Quids, Pros, and Quos, that's my last preceding episode, it was two previously anonymous civil servants who inserted the knives. And so it came to be earlier this week when one Clark and one Taylor, and now as of today, that being Friday, at another previously anonymous civil servant, that being Marie Jovanovic, all three came forward to speak their truth. And so there you have it, Clark, Taylor, and Marie. Clark, Taylor, and Marie. Gee, it sounds sort of like a folk singing trio from the 60s. But no, they weren't folk singers. They were career diplomats, foreign service officers who have spent the better part of their lives posted far from family and friends to distant locations around the globe. For their efforts, Clark, Taylor, and Marie earned modest pay and nice pensions. They, the boys, wore wingtips and pinstripe suits, and Marie, the boys at least, they wore wingtips and pinstripe suits, and Marie, well, I really don't know what she wore, but all three, for sometimes better and oftentimes worse, did the business of America overseas. So forward they came, pumped full of earnestness and good intentions. They raised their right hands and swore to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Hey, the truth. What a concept. Kind of forgot what that was. Nowadays, the truth is a kind of a quaint, almost arcane idea. Remember back in the day when truth actually mattered? Truth, justice, in the American way? Not anymore, at least not to those rats with the big R. By that I mean Republicans. Truth to them seems to be a thing of the past ever since the PVP got rent-free housing in that federal bunker over on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Anyway, those two fellows, Clark in a foggy-bottom bow tie, and Taylor with a thick head of graying hair and a commanding and resolute voice that somehow reminded everyone of Walter Cronkite, and for you millennials who don't know who Walter Cronkite was, he was, for decades, the voice of truth. I can still hear him ringing in my head like it was yesterday. And that's the way it is. March 23rd, 1974. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS, bidding you good night. That voice, it was truth incarnate. He was, how can I describe him? From his perch behind that CBS microphone, he was America's umpire, calling him as he saw him. So, when Cronkite said the Vietnam War was a waste and unwinnable, guess what? The war was over. even though it took Richard Nixon about 6 more years and 20,000 more American lives to figure that out. But the people knew it because Walter Cronkite said so. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. The dynamic trio of Clark, Taylor, and Marie sat before Adam Schiff and his committee and laid bare something that hasn't been seen for a while. That's right. You guessed it. I said it. The truth with a capital T. They sat there relaxed and at ease with themselves and the world, and before a battery of cameras and microphones calmly fielded the questions and the queries, some friendly, others from the minority vaguely hostile. They didn't need to defend themselves or anybody else for that matter. They just related what they witnessed. They talked about what they heard. Now, I could bury you in the details. I could recite a sort of play-by-play, blow-by-blow account of the proceedings, but you have MSNBC for that. You have CNN. You have every other news outlet. You don't need me for that. I don't want to bury you and bore you in those details. Rather, I'll reduce the whole deal to one sentence, and that sentence proceeds as follows, and I quote from myself: "He who has the hammer pounds, and he who doesn't gets pounded." And as the story goes and the narrative flows, the PVP, by that I mean Putin's vice president, was totally convinced that he had the hammer. And with hammer in hand, he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Firstly, by withholding U.S. military aid to the Ukraine, he'd be doing a major solid for his boss. By that I mean his patron saint, the dawn of all dawns, the czar of all czars, that being Big Bad Vlad up in Moscow. You see, like all the czars that came before Big Bad Vlad, like Catherine the Great, all the way to Big Bad Joe Stalin, Big Bad Vlad has been very hungry for a thick slice of Ukrainian cheese. So hungry, in fact, that the Vlad stole his first slice of Ukrainian cheese a couple years back when he grabbed the Crimea down there on the Black Sea. Apparently they have nice beaches down there and the water is warm, but sadly the surf sucks. But that didn't matter to Big Bad Vlad because, well, Vlad don't surf. But Vlad, like his Tsarist predecessors, does need a warm water port that isn't clogged with icebergs half the year. And Big Bad Vlad needed a shortcut to the Mediterranean for his navy. Besides, Russia has stakes in the Crimea. In fact, they had already fought and lost a war to keep it. That war was called, yes, you guessed it, the Crimean War, which was fought against England and France and Turkey way back in like the 1850s. The Charge of the Light Brigade, they made a movie called that. That was the Crimean War. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, Ukrainian cheese. The thing about Ukrainian cheese is once you get a bite of it, it only makes you hungrier for more. So now, Big Bad Vlad was nibbling for more Ukrainian cheese, this time in a region of the country known as Donbass. And don't ask me about the Donbass, maybe I'm a dumbass, but I don't know about the Donbass, except apparently it has a lot of coal. And if you live in the northern reaches of the Eurasian continent where it gets very, very cold, you need plenty of coal to keep you warm. That's what I do know. And I also know that Big Bad Vlad wants it. So what did he do? He sent his soldiers down there to get it. So any help Big Bad Vlad could get from his chief lieutenant over in America, by that I mean, you know, the PVP, Putin's vice president, it would be highly appreciated. A very nice favor indeed, or a really cool quid, or even a really nice pro for that matter. You take your pick. Secondly, and of more immediate and personal importance to the PVP, the brat boy was hoping that by intimidating a country on the fringes of Europe that is defending its cheese against Big Bad Vlad, the brat boy, or the predator-in-chief, could get the newly elected rookie Ukrainian president, who, by the way, was a former comedian. The PVP was hoping he could get that former comedian turned Ukrainian president to offer up dirt on his most likely political opponent in next year's election. That being, of course, the OVP, or Obama's vice president or Joe Biden. So the PVP held back some serious quid. By that I mean military assistance that was already approved in exchange for some serious quo. And the quo the PVP was after was an announcement from the Ukrainian comedian turned president that his government was indeed investigating the former VP, not the PVP, but the OVP, Obama's vice president. They were investigating him, apparently, for intervening on behalf of his son, who somehow managed to get himself a really cool gig on the board of a Ukrainian oil company. How he got that gig, I have no idea, but he got the gig. Now, if they could somehow show that the OVP intervened on behalf of his son, which he didn't, that would qualify as corruption with a capital C. Now, to the PVP, it was silver platter stuff, horse heads in the bed stuff, if you get my reference. The Ukraine is, by all accounts, a new country. Recently divorced from Mother Russia, the Ukraine is desperate to keep its cheese. In point of fact, they are fighting for their life and are desperate for any help they can get, especially from the good old US of A in the forms of guns and ammo. Because every day Ukraine soldiers come back in body bags shot dead by Russian soldiers who are doing their damnness to slice off as much Ukrainian cheese as possible and feed it to big bad Vlad up in Moscow. So the long and the short of it is this. When your neck is on the chopping block, you do what you have to do to save that neck. And the brat boy who knows a scam when he sees it knew that. So he sent in Rudy G and his goofballs to work a deal with the Ukrainian comedian turned president. If only that rookie Ukrainian president would just get his ass on CNN and say they were going to investigate Sleepy Joe, you know, the OVP. It didn't matter if there was an iota of truth in that announcement. That was meaningless. If he would just announce it. I mean, he didn't even have to frigging investigate. Just get on fucking TV and say his name and we're investigating him. Now, that was a strategy born not just of desperation, but also born of precedent. After all, the brat boy's thinking was, hey, it had worked before with Hillary in those emails. We stirred up enough lies and smoke that it put us over the edge. If we can just get the whiff of misbehavior, bad judgment, and corruption out there with the OVP and his misguided, greedy son, believe you me, thought the PVP, I can whip up a fucking frenzy. Just give me a little smoke and I'll blow it into fire. We'll get the lock 'em up chant going again. Hannity will pour gasoline on it and it will explode into a 4-alarm fucking fire and the election will be mine. Because that's what I do. That's my stock and trade. After all, I learned at the foot of the master, Roy Cohn. And if you don't know who Roy Cohn is, folks, look him up or see the movie. There's a doc about him out there right now. And besides, this whole smear campaign stuff is nothing new. It worked back in 2004 with that Weisenheimer John Kerry when he ran against the Texas good old boy W. Remember that? It was called swift boating. They turned a genuine war hero into a bumbling coward. Just get some lies going. Let them float around in social media for a while, and pretty soon, some media outlet, you know, NBC, ABC, CBS, some big daddy will pick it up, and then your opponent has to play defense. Your opponent is on his heels. He's wounded just enough to flip a few votes here, suppress a few votes there, and then bingo, mission accomplished. The PVP wins the election and gets 4 more rent-free years in the federal bunker at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Otherwise, the way things are going with the impeachment and the courts and the poll numbers, the PVP still might get rent-free housing, but this time in a federal penitentiary. Talk about truth, justice, and the American way. Wouldn't that be nice? Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought. Until next time, folks. Namaste, shalom, and aloha. Or